Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Andrew Neville, and we are here for our live Q&A, Ask Me Anything type of an event. We're going to talk about anything and everything that is adrenal fatigue. I want to do a couple. I need to get a thumbs up from my crew just to make sure our audio and video is working okay. We should be coming live on Facebook as well as on YouTube, which is pretty exciting. And as we kind of get set up, welcome. If everybody could say hi, right? Say hi in the comments. Let me know, let us know your name and where you're from. That would be great. That would be good. Okay. So it looks like we're live, and we're good to go. Okay, so we're going to talk about anything and everything that is adrenal fatigue. This event is a public event for sure. However, the patients that are in my program, the one of the core programs or Jumpstart program, we've got a few of these different programs, which I'm thrilled to have available for people. They get kind of priority seating as far as questions go. So I'll address those questions sooner rather than later. But by all means, if you have questions, put them in the comments. My amazing team will handle those questions, get them to me, listen in, and certainly if you're live, we'll try to give you a little bit of a priority too. We've got a ton of questions coming in, big list already. So we're going to just jump right in and get started. Okay. So keep questions coming. Let me know where you're from. Give me your name. Tell us where you're from, how you're joining. And I'm going to jump into the questions. Okay. So here we go. Nicole says, I'm in the core program and on my way to recovery. Each week gets better and better. Exclamation point. That's what I like to see. I just want to say thank you. Exclamation point. Awesome, Nicole. It's good to hear. Questions. I want to start introducing light exercise. Is Pilates a good low-key exercise? All right. So there's another question too, but I'll deal with that one first. It's awesome, Nicole, that you're improving and that you're getting better. It is also awesome that you think that exercise is a good idea right now. I'm not so sure it is. It's hard. And a lot of my patients kind of get the idea that I'm like anti-exercise, that I don't want people to exercise. That's not true. I'm very pro-exercise. I want all my patients to move as much as possible, but just not too much. And it's really easy to do too much exercise with this condition. So that's the challenge, because our body's ability to create energy, which happens kind of in the mitochondria and all that, that's damaged. It's one of the main reasons, not the only one, but one of the main reasons for the fatigue, this really deep fatigue that we have. So I'm really cautious with exercise. In fact, some of my patients will come into me and they've been over exercisers, right? And that's a challenge, right? Exercise is a stress, right? We have to admit that exercise is a stress on the body. It's a good stress. We want stress. You want to stress the heart, the muscles, break them down, they build back stronger and all that. Exercise is incredibly important, but it is a stress on the body. And what I usually tell people is the more you exercise, especially early on in one of these programs, the more you exercise, the slower you'll heal. Because your body's got to spend energy on that stuff as opposed to kind of saving energy to be able to heal and repair. So less is more. Pilates is fine. Yoga is fine. Just gentle stretching, walking a little bit here and there. You're better to just do little bits. Start out very, very cautiously, like way below what your threshold may be. Again, even Pilates and yoga, that could be pretty intense as far as exercise goes. Don't do that yet. Again, eventually, yes. The key is listen to your body. I have this 3-day rule, right? Which you've heard about in the program. One change every 3 days. So do something, see how you feel later, see how you feel the next day, see how you feel on day 3. And if you don't feel any worse for wear, you can kind of do it again, right? Don't build it up yet. Like, how we're supposed to incrementally build up our reps or our time in exercise programs. that's for someone with a normal kind of healthy physiology. That's not what we're dealing with yet. So just go very slow. You can kind of flop around on the floor a little bit doing something. But the exercise in the beginning is more so for your psychological well-being than kind of for the purpose of exercise itself. So just be cautious. Second question, why do I randomly feel heat in the palms of my hands and the soles of my feet? Interesting one. That's going to be probably an autonomic nervous system response, right? You know how if we're driving in a car on a highway and somebody cuts us off real quick, like we'll sweat, right? Our palms are sweaty. We get palpitations, right? We get this warmth that comes over us, right? We can feel that, maybe even a little nausea, something like that. That's all autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system part of your stress response system, right? Which is threefold, right? Hormones, nerves, limbic system in the brain. The autonomics tend to control that sweat response, a lot of temperature, vasodilation, vasoconstriction. That's out of balance, right? Maybe not working in as much of a kind of a nuanced, dynamic way that it should. It'll balance out. It'll balance out in time. Just keep shifting this physiology. Awesome. And thanks for the feedback. Razia says, how soon after rising in the morning should I eat breakfast on the hypoglycemic diet? I try to get food into people, within 30 to 60 minutes. It can take some time. The appetite is really problematic for a lot of patients because, when we're in fight or flight, right, which happens with adrenal fatigue, when we're in fight or flight, we're suppressing those four major organs, right? Your immune, digestive, reproductive, thyroid, suppress the digestion, and your body's not really geared up to eat. So it's hard. So sometimes it takes a little time, but within 30 to 60 minutes is a good idea. Even if your appetite is totally suppressed, get something, a couple bites of something, a couple gulps of a protein shake, even just get something. And then a couple hours later, get a little something else. Thank you. Okay, Diane says, and these are all program people, it's quite a few questions, but we'll get to as many as we can. And for people who have joined on the live event, let us know where you're from. Say hi in the comments. Let us know where you're from. I've got my team managing the comments. They're awesome with that stuff. We're always curious. Diane says, I've been diagnosed with heart failure, having a large heart chamber AFib, low ejection fraction, being diagnosed with heart failure in the past. They're telling me to limit salt. Yeah. And yet to heal from adrenal fatigue, which I have an official diagnosis that I do have, taking additional salt, right kind of salt is an important factor. How do I balance what I'm being told from mainstream medicine versus the wonderful holistic approach? I am all about holistic, anti-mainstream, but this is a reality I need to deal with. So looking for a path which is best to me. Absolutely. And, mainstream medicine is good at certain things, right? I mean, it's good at trauma. It's good at surgery and good at diagnostics, right? We can do all these kinds of scans and things like that. The treatments I sometimes disagree with, but we need mainstream medicine, right? There's a place for all of it. So the salt thing that they're concerned about is with regard to blood pressure primarily, right? And anytime there's a cardiovascular problem, right, the first thing they do is throw the salt out the window, like get off salt. In part, they're right? Because you do want to avoid the sodium that's in all the processed food. You do want to avoid your table salt, right? Your purified, bleached sodium chloride, right? That we're all used to. That stuff's not good for you. But the salt you do need, and in fact, is incredibly important, if not the most important mineral in the body is sodium, because nothing works from a cellular standpoint. Nothing works without adequate sodium. We need it. And it's your adrenals' job to help you to hold on to it. So when the adrenals are weak, you can't hold on to salt very well, which means we kind of can't hold on to water because water follows salt, right? And that's why my patients will urinate a little more frequently than the average person, get lightheaded a little bit as well. So until your adrenals can do that job, we need that salt. You want to get it in a healthy salt, like an unrefined sea salt. Celtic, real salt, pink Himalayan salt. That's my third favorite these days. I don't know why. Well, I don't know the mechanism, but I've seen some people do better on Celtic and or real salt for some reason. That I don't know why. This kind of salt is different, right? It's different because it's got all these other minerals in it. It's unprocessed. And here's the thing, we're not overloading your body with salt or sodium. You're kind of getting levels that are low, you're increasing them. When there's heart failure, they're always trying to decrease the load on the heart, get the blood pressure down, get the blood volume down, sometimes to excess. So this kind of salt should not cause any problems. Obviously, you want to be cautious with it and watch your blood pressure, right? We want to be conservative. Make sure pressure doesn't go up, no problems. But increasing your salt to take care of the adrenals and that process is not contraindicated with regard to heart failure and what modern medicine is telling you. And that heart failure, that's kind of a mitochondrial problem to a large degree. Like I was talking about, the mitochondria are the energy producers in the cells, right? Well, the heart is just a big muscle. And you can support those mitochondria. There's a guy named Sinatra, not Frank, Stephen. I think Stephen Sinatra is an MD. He wrote a couple books with regard to about heart failure, and he's got a pretty decent protocol for, if you wanted to check that out. Again, holistic. It's a holistic approach, magnesium and CoQ10 and a couple things. So that can be helpful. Okay, Tashina says, thanks for your question. Have you ever had patients with adrenal fatigue that suffered from dissociation too? If so, were you able to help them heal from both? Yeah. I mean, it happens, right? It definitely happens. There's a whole lot of neurological stuff that goes wrong when you bathe the body, the brain, in stress hormone and the metabolic exhaust of stress physiology being here, right? Which is, the body is kind of running from a tiger. The internal metabolic exhaust are free radicals and oxidative stress. The free radicals are in the blood. The stress hormone is in the blood. So it goes everywhere, right? The blood goes everywhere. The damage is actually everywhere. When you throw a bunch of stress hormone and free radicals into the brain, all kinds of things go wrong. We kind of collectively call this brain fog, but that brain fog, there are many, many, many issues and dysfunctions that actually connects to, whether that's memory or focus or even decision making. And I would put dissociation in there as well. Because it is kind of sounds like a psychological kind of a term, but when you start to disrupt some of those neural firings and those mechanisms, you can get some weird stuff happening in the brain. And yes, it heals over time. It does heal over time. So again, the key, which you've heard about in my program, is shifting this physiology, right? Get our body out of fight or flight physiology and into that rest and digest physiology, which is where we heal and repair. And what will happen over time is all these symptoms that come about from too much stress hormone, they will decrease in intensity, frequency, and duration over time, little by little by little, right? And as that happens, you will come back. You will feel more of yourself with increased intensity, frequency, and duration. And maybe that's energy, cognitive function, but also mood and focus, right? It's hard to be patient to watch this happen, but it absolutely happens, right? Shift this physiology, you turn off the wear and tear, turn on the healing and repair, and all bets are off. Like you can heal just about anything. Okay. Sherry says, is it necessary to use salt? I'm sensitive to it, and it causes eczema for me. That's weird. I can still do it, but it's uncomfortable. So I'm curious how critical it is to use it. I've tried all types with the same result. Eczema is almost always a sensitivity, like food sensitivity. So I see eczema in my patients all the time because the vast majority of them have food sensitivities from this stress physiology, suppress the immune, suppress the digestive system. There's your food allergy. In fact, we test for food allergies in the kind of primary program I run for patients with with adrenal fatigue. It's our all access program. And if, by the way, you're kind of curious about that, please reach out in the comments. I've got patient coordinators who are some of the most understanding, gracious people around, to be able to talk. There's a free consultation just to talk with them to see if that's a fit, and they can kind of talk about that. There's 2 tests I run in that program. The first one is for the adrenals, and then the second one is actually a food allergy test because we see it so commonly. So I believe you, Sherry, that you're reacting and have the eczema. It sounds like you've tried. And that's what my suggestion was, to try a variety of salts for sure, and just try to see what's going on and why you're having that kind of a reaction. You might want to try even a sodium tablet to see, because is there something, like, I like sea salt, right? But is there something in the sea part of the sea salt that you're reacting to allergically? It would be really strange for you to react with an allergy or eczema to sodium. And we do need sodium. Like, that's the most important part of it. So this isn't ideal, but you might want to try like a sodium tablet and see if you can get a little bit of that in you. Even if you can't, it's not necessary. The adrenal supports will help, right? Because we shouldn't have to micromanage our salt. I guess I should start with that, right? Like, the adrenals should be doing it. But the adrenals are kind of beat up. They're not doing that good of a job with that. So we have to help. It's an assist. But as your adrenals heal, they will be able to do it. So any of the direct adrenal supports, like pregnenolone or adrenal cortex or licorice root, those can help, especially licorice root extract. So licorice root extract has a cortisol-like effect, but also an aldosterone-like effect. And aldosterone is the hormone that helps you to hold on to salt. So, caveat, make sure your blood pressure is adequate. If you have high blood pressure, you should be cautious with taking licorice because it can increase it. But taking licorice root extract kind of in a gradually increasing dose can help with the salt as well. So that would be one that I would kind of lean towards for you, possibly. Second question. My weight has not budged in a few months. Even though I kept my carbs to a minimum, eat clean, I keep my calories under 1,400. Are there macros we should try to follow? Okay, so great question, Sherry. The issue with weight is a very common weight gain. It's a very common issue. There's some patients are weight losers, but weight gain is a very common issue with regard to this, where we will see when our body is under stress, you'll develop kind of the fatigue, the pain, the brain fog, insomnia, weight, anxiety, depression, all that kind of stuff, right? So weight's a big issue. Why? Well, weight is about metabolism. It's about how efficiently can our body take energy from food, turn it into a universal form of energy that we have, right? And that's mitochondrial function. But when we think about weight, we've got calories in, right? This old concept, right? Calories in versus calories out. But there's also a whole lot of metabolism that has to happen in between. And that metabolism is governed by your adrenals and your thyroid working together, helping the mitochondria create energy efficiently. Well, that's busted, right? It's busted. That thing is broken. Adrenals are off, thyroid's off, mitochondrial damage, right? So it takes time to be able to heal that in a significant way. So let's look at the other 2 options. We've got calories out. Calories out is exercise, right? Which is a stress, like I talked about earlier. So we have to be somewhat cautious with exercise. Pushing that too much can then kind of even slow down healing. So really the main area that we're looking at is probably calories in, which is where we have at least a modicum of control. You don't want to drop your calories too low, right? Below that, that magic number of 1,200 is not bad. You definitely don't want to go below that. 1,400, I think is what you said. That's not bad. I generally am a low carb person, especially for anybody with adrenal issues. We want to be low carb. So a little more of the protein and fat. Some people respond to very low carb, right? Kind of pushing, doesn't have to be, but moving in the direction of more ketogenic diet. Everybody's a little bit different, right? From a genetic standpoint, and then from an epigenetic standpoint as to how much protein, fat, and carbs. So I can't give you specific numbers, but usually as I'm going through this, the weight will gradually come off. I generally will start to kind of pull back on carbs. If that's a little slower, I might drop the carbs a little lower. Pretty common for me to say, all right, well, take a look at how much carb you're taking in, cut it in half, right? Whatever it is, just cut it in half. Now make sure you're getting adequate calorie, you're having enough protein and fat, but cut it in half and see how you do for a little while. And sometimes I'll even go cut it in half again to see. Most of my patients do fine on a lower carb diet, even a very low carb diet, but occasionally it's too low. They don't feel good on that lower carb diet. They got to add carbs back in. It's just this experimentation. There's no hard and fast rule to know who's who and exactly what you need in particular. So that's the hard part. Okay. Diane. Okay, heart failure. Okay, I know I need to exercise to strengthen my heart, improve my ejection fraction, yet being adrenal fatigue, exercise is really not my friend. How do I balance what I know I need to strengthen my heart and healing from adrenal fatigue? Walking, vibration plate. I know from experience in the past several months that aerobic exercise completely drains me, so would love some guidance. Okay, don't do anything that drains you. Okay, whether it's drains you from a cardiac standpoint or drains you from an adrenal fatigue standpoint, don't do that, right? Vibration plates are good. It's kind of an efficient form of exercise. Not sure how much cardiovascular strain or training that happens with one of the vibration plates. Walking is fine. Walking is good. Not fine. Walking is good. Stay under the radar of your body, right? I would test it out, right? Walk, whether it's 15 minutes, slow pace. How do? You do that okay? 3-day rule, right? Okay, day 1, okay, day 2, okay, day 3, okay, do it again. And then just kind of incrementally build it up. The biggest challenge that most of my patients have from an energy standpoint has to do with sustaining energy over time. That's kind of where the mitochondria are mostly damaged in sustaining energy. So doing anything over time ends up exhausting us, and then we might kick in with more stress hormone to get us through. So do your exercise in chunks, I guess is what I'm going to. Like if you can walk for 30 minutes, you might be better to walk 15 in the morning and 15 in the afternoon, right? Just to split it up and get this kind of rest period. It's all about fuel and how efficiently we can create fuel. I like weights. I like weight-bearing exercise. I think these things are important, right? And can also kind of train the heart and the muscles. Incredibly well documented. Of course, exercise is good for us in many ways. You just have to be cautious, right? Stay below the radar of your body. Make sure your body doesn't complain too much. And I'm not talking muscle soreness. I'm talking, adrenal symptoms like deeper fatigue. But then, getting your heart rate up a little bit, just start low and slow and just very, very gradually build it up. Okay. Eva mentions DNRS, which she's benefited from. Cool. So DNRS, just for everybody else, there's a couple programs. DNRS is Dynamic Neural Retraining System. These are it's an amygdala retraining program. The flagship was called the Gupta program that came out many, many years ago. Amygdala retraining, right? So the amygdala is in the limbic system. So if I go back a little bit, and I've got videos on all this stuff on YouTube, if you need to fill in the blanks, I apologize if I skip over stuff. Our stress response system, and that's what adrenal fatigue is, right? Adrenal fatigue is not a good name for this condition. It's really a stress response system dysfunction. Stress response system is threefold: hormones, nerves, and the limbic system in the brain, which basically calls the shots. There's a couple of little organs up in the limbic system: the hippocampus, the amygdala, the insula. The amygdala is the big one with regard to emotions and perceiving stress and things like that. These programs, these amygdala retraining programs, DNRS, Gupta program, they go through a series of processes There's a cognitive behavioral therapy aspect of it, and then an NLP aspect of it, which is neuro-linguistic programming, just kind of using language, basically to help to rewire the brain. They're useful. I mean, they really are useful. I don't recommend them in every patient, just because I generally don't have to. They're just specific kind of standalone programs. What I find gets people better the fastest is dealing with all three aspects of this condition: adrenal fatigue, this stress response system dysfunction. Whereas amygdala retraining, I mean, it just deals with the limbic system. Now, which is good, which I do with everybody, right? I'm always working on the limbic system in numerous ways. Amygdala retraining is just one way. But when you work on all three sides of that stress response system, that's where people get better the fastest. But awesome, good for you. I have no problem with DNRS or others. Okay, Nicole says, I'm going to go through this quick. So I used to get heart palpitations after eating. It seemed to me like my body didn't like certain foods. Started the hypoglycemic diet, they went away. Recently, I had an oops, where I've slowly been incorporating low-carb foods so that I'm not hungry all the time. Sweet potato, protein halfway, tachycardia. I remember later I had not eaten in 4.5 hours. Oops. Was it the sweet potato or my blood sugar dropped too low to raise my blood sugar? I tested after blood sugar 144. Okay. So tachycardia, right? Heart palpitations, tachycardia is basically it's adrenaline, right? From the autonomic nervous system or from the adrenals, you've dumped adrenaline. So our question is always why? So why did I just dump that adrenaline? Usually what happens is it's that blood sugar dropping, right? When your blood sugar drops, your adrenals have to fix that. That is their job and their job only, right? So they are stimulated a couple different ways, but they are stimulated. They release stress hormone, go to the liver, tell the liver to release a stored form of sugar into the blood so you don't pass out from low blood sugar. That's work every time that happens. And with the stress response system dysfunction, right, with this adrenal fatigue, we tend to make mountains out of molehills, right? So for most people, their blood sugar drops, their adrenals fix it, and they don't even feel it, right? You can sleep right through it. But for us, we make mountains out of molehills, right? So little blood sugar drop, major response, like there's an actual tiger in front of us, so the heart starts going. Okay, so chances are it was the blood sugar drop thing. So you just want to look at your previous meal when that happens. And it's going to be one of those three things, right? The three tenets of this hypoglycemic diet: small, frequent meals, more protein and fat, low sugar and carb. So just pick at those. Did I go too long without eating? Did I have too little protein and fat, so my blood sugar dropped? Or did I have too much carb at that meal, so the blood sugar dropped first? Sounds like you might have gone too long. And once that blood sugar drops, you kind of need sugar, right? You need some sugar and carb to get that up, because if you eat like protein and fat, it's going to take a while for that to kind of get metabolized and turned into sugar. So you kind of need something at that point. Now, I'm not a huge fan of like orange juice and simple sugars and things like that. Occasionally, right? But the big thing is prevention. You just want to keep preventing the blood sugar from dropping. Okay. Austin says, what to do when you're sensitive to all supplements and detox is not working? Okay. Well, I don't detox my patients. I used to a little bit, but it didn't really help anybody. Not long term. Most of the time, people didn't feel well when you do it, right? And they'd say, "Oh, that's a detox reaction. That's a good thing." It didn't really make a whole lot of difference. I think the safest way to detoxify people is to turn on their detoxification system. Because if your body is stuck in a stress response, which most people with adrenal fatigue, that's the problem, then detoxification, that's a maintenance issue, right? Your body doesn't care about detoxification, maintenance, right? There's a tiger, like we're going to deal with that. Detoxification is a fairly complex process as well. Multiple organs, different phases, all that stuff. The safest way to do it is to let your body do it. shift this physiology, and the body will detoxify. The other thing, Austin, is I don't know that toxicity is your problem, which is why you're sensitive to stuff. We think about, oh, it's the liver, my liver's clogged. Not really. All patients with adrenal fatigue are sensitive. All. Some more sensitive than others. In fact, my predecessor, Dr. Posnecker, he wrote, or maybe he told me, he said, if you had to use only one word to describe somebody who has adrenal fatigue, that's the only word you could use. That word would have to be sensitive. And sensitive on so many different levels, right? We're a little more sensitive to our environment, a little more caring, maybe sensitive from a allergy kind of standpoint, and sensitive from just a reactivity standpoint. Much of that sensitivity actually is up in the limbic system. When you throw a bunch of stress hormone into the brain and free radicals, it becomes sensitized. And in the research, they call this central sensitization, central for the central nervous system, right up in the brain, sensitization. So what that means is the limbic system overreacts to stuff, right? So that minor stressors don't generate a minor response, right? Again, mountains out of molehills, right? Minor stress, major response. Well, that sensitization actually happens throughout the nervous system. So all nerves kind of get hit with this excess stress hormone, and they tend to get trigger happy, even the sensory nerves, right? So a lot of my patients will come in, they're like, doc, I'm sensitive to these bright lights, loud sounds, bother me, right? Harsh chemicals and smells, even touch. So you can touch one of my patients, right? And it registers as pain. Everything is just hypervigilant and on red alert, right? Very common in patients with adrenal fatigue. As we shift this physiology, and you don't need supplements to shift this physiology. Do they help? They expedite the process? Yeah, they do, and they can, and I use them. But if you can't take them, don't take them. You got to do all the other work, right? Which is all the lifestyle stuff and the dietary recommendations, the salt, the blood sugar, and lifestyle modifications, resting and pacing, and trying to slow down, trying not to push, relaxation exercise, turn on the vagus nerve, all those various things that I talk about. I talk about them in all of my programs, right? So those programs that I have that I mentioned, I answered all those questions. The programs that I have, my core programs, Jumpstart is kind of a starter program, but Core and then Core Plus, they contain kind of a distillation of all this information, all the advice I've given over the past 20 years to patients right in front of me, right? Patients that would come to our clinic, stay at our guest house, spend tens of thousands of dollars to be here. I've recorded all that, right? And I've written it all down. So this is the compilation or distillation of all that guidance, right? And information all together in this kind of neatly kind of doled out, actionable kind of program. I mean, that's what those are about. I just launched those this year. And I'm thrilled to be able to do it. Obviously, you can probably tell I'm excited about it, because one of my biggest concerns, like obviously not everybody has tens of thousands of dollars to come and get that level of care, right? So I wanted to be able to put something out there that can still help to target and individualize, because people are different with this. Like that's the hard part. There's no cookie cutter approach, but I've been able to build that into the program at a lower price point to get the information to more people. Yeah, it's awesome. I'm thrilled about it. And if you have any questions about that, like just reach out, throw a comment, and my crew will get to you. Okay, so Michelle asks, did I answer the question? Oh, I think I did. Okay. Michelle says, tell me more. I will. Tell me more about why adrenal fatigue causes lightheadedness. How do you heal after COVID if you have adrenal fatigue? I was having adrenal fatigue symptoms for several months, then got COVID, mild case, yet lightheadedness, fatigue is still an issue. Okay, so the lightheadedness goes to the salt thing. Basically, your adrenals control a bunch of different physiology. Sugar and salt are two of the big ones, right? So we talked a little bit about the importance of balancing the blood sugar, eating a hypoglycemic diet. But the adrenals also help you to hold on to salt. And in the body, water follows salt, right? It's osmosis, basically. So follow my logic, right? So if the adrenals are weak and you can't hold on to salt, you can't hold on to water. So what does that mean? That's why my patients will often urinate more frequently than the average person. It will affect blood volume, right? Because blood volume is mostly water. So low salt, low water, low blood volume, lower blood pressure. At least in the beginning, it can go up. And that also contributes to the lightheadedness, right? So lightheadedness, just not enough blood getting to the brain, essentially, right? The elevator's not reaching the top floor. So that's kind of primarily what we're looking at. What's more important than the lightheadedness or frequent urination or whatever? It means that you're going to be chronically dehydrated, and not just superficially, but dehydrated at a cellular level. And when cells are dehydrated, they don't work. They're not efficient, pro-inflammatory. I mean, they're not going to heal. They're not going to repair. So you definitely have to rehydrate from the inside out. And until the adrenals can do it, you get to do it by eating more salt, like we had talked about. Some kind of unrefined salt in food and then in water, that kind of a thing to get that up. As far as COVID goes, COVID is a stressor, right? It's a stress on our system. Any infection is an added stress on our system. And to me, it all goes into the same bucket, right? So COVID's in there, just like, your job is in there, your kids are in there, right? The traffic is in there, past trauma, past abuse, injuries, symptoms, like social media, like it's all in that same bucket. So for a lot of people, this adrenal fatigue thing is incredibly common. I mean, how common is too much stress, burning the candle at both ends and all, right? So when COVID came around, this pandemic, people started getting COVID, their bucket was already partially full or too full, right? Then COVID hit and boom, it was like the straw that breaks the camel's back. Right now, not only are they sick with COVID, but now they got a bunch of adrenal symptoms as well. And if you look at the symptoms of long COVID, right, we're talking adrenal fatigue, right? That's what those symptoms are, the majority of them. So COVID is a stressor, right? It's a stressor. You take a hit. So you do what you need to do to try to treat the COVID and the infection, right? But then you just got to focus on the adrenal side. You focus on the adrenal side, long COVID goes away, right? And that's what I talk about in those programs or one-on-one. I still have room to talk to people one-on-one, and I do this all access program to do that. Okay, so good luck with that. Let's see. So Kathy says, so is intermittent fasting not recommended? No, not for this problem. Intermittent fasting is fine if somebody doesn't have an adrenal problem. But if you have an adrenal problem, you can't go that long because now you're stressing your adrenals. When you're not eating, your adrenals have to fix your blood sugar, and that's just an added stress. It's also a controllable stress. Once you don't have adrenal fatigue anymore, sure. Okay, just make sure I'm reading this right. A grandma's attic says, why do I have severe sugar cravings at times? I'm talking eating it with a spoon cravings. Anybody? That's a great question. Anybody with adrenal problems is going to have a weird relationship with sugar. Most of us. I actually, as a kid, I kind of convinced myself that I like to have tea. Like I would sit and have tea, like with my mom, that kind of a thing. But literally, you could stand the spoon up in the tea with the amount of sugar I put in that tea. So it was pretty much the sugar I liked. It's an adrenal thing, right? Because your adrenals, that's what cortisol does. Cortisol controls your blood sugar. If you've got cortisol problems, you're going to have weird issues with sugar. So believe it or not, if you do the hypoglycemic diet the right way for you, those sugar cravings do go down. And I laugh because when I say that to patients, they roll their eyes and they're like, I can tell, right? They're like, you don't know my sugar cravings. No, I do. Because I've been there. I've been there on my own, and I've been there with numerous people. Even those cravings, as crazy as they are, they will go down when you do small, frequent meals, more protein, fat, low sugar, and carb. It takes a little time, but when you do that right, it improves. So that's why. Michelle says, why would your 4-point cortisol numbers be within the normal range, yet you have numerous adrenal fatigue symptoms? Great question. So the challenge with the cortisol testing, right, is the interpretation of it, because it's not just about cortisol first and foremost. There's a process, kind of a disease or dysfunction process that people go through: early stage, middle stage, late stage. The early stage is where everything's high, actually. But eventually you can't keep releasing that amount of cortisol, that amount of DHEA, and the levels come down. They end up coming down through normal on their way to low. Low is like a later stage. But as people go through the middle stage, those cortisols can look normal. Now, most of the time there's subtle change within those. And I interpret these, or I reinterpret these tests for patients all the time, which is actually really frustrating because, like, just last week I had a patient come in, and 2 years ago she had a saliva test and the cortisol was normal-ish, right? But there was a, barely normal morning cortisol, and then it was high. The evening cortisol was kind of high. So the curve was flattening out. Plus there was a DHEA that was low. And that combination of things tells me, okay, middle stage. But the doctor said, things are normal. That's not your problem. Let's chase after this. So for 2 more years, right, she's going down the detox pathways, and let's treat that. Let's treat Candida. Let's do a parasite cleanse. Let's do must be Lyme. I know it didn't show up on the test. I'll just make a clinical diagnosis. Let's go down that pathway. She's no better. 2 years later, she ends up in front of me. Now I'm going to repeat her cortisol test, but I had to tell her, like, you had it back then. They just missed it. So that's the answer. So it's the interpretation of the test that's really important. And I've just seen thousands of these things at this point. Okay. Hikasta says, hi Casta. Do you recommend bioidentical hormones for women with very low testosterone? If not, what treatment do you recommend instead? The treatment, I don't mind bioidentical hormones. However, the key with testosterone, especially for women, is most of it should be coming from your adrenals, not necessarily your ovaries, depending on your age. So when our physiology is like this, right? We are in fight or flight physiology, stress physiology. We suppress 4 main organs: immune, digestive, reproductive, thyroid. So the question I always have is, okay, your testosterone's low. Why? Why is it low? Right? The why is because we're here and we're suppressing it. Right? And we know that. It's incredibly well documented that stress suppresses gonadal function, right? Both men and women, which leads to low testosterone, both men and women. Fix that. Stop suppressing that system, right? Shift this physiology, fix the adrenal fatigue, and then the testosterone takes care of itself. It does. It does. I mean, I've seen it hundreds of times. So treat it at a bit of a different level. Using bioidenticals is okay, but there's you got to be cautious, right? There's some side effects, and of course, it doesn't fix the underlying problem, right? That's the big thing. Okay. So Lisa says, how's our time? All right. Lisa says, cold plunging and varieties of that concept seem big in the natural medicine world right now with regard to dysautonomia, vagus nerve, but seems like such a shock to the body. Is this something not advised for people with adrenal fatigue, or would it be a good thing? Yeah, it's a great point, Lisa. It is a big thing these days. No, I don't recommend it for my patients. Cold is a stress. Actually, both extremes of temperature are stress. Cold, we know specifically, stresses people. Now, here's the thing, and I'm glad you brought this up because I was just watching, just last night, actually, a couple of patients had recommended I should watch this Limitless thing with Chris Hemsworth. All about stress and that kind of, and the information is really good, but we have to be cautious with it because it's Chris Hemsworth. Like, he's a pretty healthy dude in many ways. So stressing his system is going to be different than stressing one of my patients. Like my patients have a stress response system dysfunction. And in the beginning of treatment, we actually don't want to stimulate that. We don't want to trigger that. What he's doing, he's training his normal stress response system. He's training it, and that's great. But if you've got somebody with adrenal fatigue, you actually don't want to do that yet. And I talk about stress in kind of a derogatory way, like all stress is bad. All stress is not bad, right? Stress is not bad. But there is a level like where you increase stress in somebody's life, you increase stress, and actually performance improves. It gets better. We get quicker, sharper, stronger, right? But if you keep increasing that stress, that function starts to decline now with added stress, right? They call that an inverted U. So there's this inverted U. Optimal stress is here, right? Go beyond that, and now you're functioning very suboptimally. This is where all my patients are. You know, Chris Hemsworth is up here. He can handle a little extra stress, right? We want to move people back, right? Stress is not to be avoided forever. That's not really the thing. But in the beginning, especially, we want to be really cautious with it. No cold. I love contrast hydrotherapy. In naturopathic medicine, we learn all about this stuff. It's actually how naturopathic medicine originated back in Europe. It was all about contrast hydrotherapy and ice baths and hot, cold, all kinds of stuff. So I'm a big hydrotherapy person, but not the cold systemically in the beginning. A couple of years from now, sure, go for it. Patricia asks, what blood test is used to confirm adrenal fatigue? I don't tend to use blood tests. I tend to use saliva tests. Saliva tests the free hormone, so free cortisol as opposed to bound cortisol. The blood tests everything. Free hormone is more active. So really the saliva test is the most accurate way. The blood test can give you a little information, but like if you go to your conventional doctor, and you say, I think I might have adrenal fatigue, first of all, they will probably roll their eyes, maybe laugh you out of the office because they're taught that adrenal fatigue doesn't exist, right? They're taught that if your adrenals haven't completely failed, which is a pretty rare condition, it's called Addison's disease. I mean, it's real, it happens, but it's very rare. If they can rule out Addison's, they're going to tell you your adrenals are fine. Now, nothing could be further from the truth. It doesn't even make logical sense, actually, if we think about it, because like they'll let you have a thyroid hormone problem short of complete failure. They'll let you have an ovarian hormone problem short of complete failure, but not your adrenals. Like if your adrenals are functioning they're perfect, not a problem. So they do this Addison's test, right? And then if your adrenals respond at all to the stimulus they give you, then you don't have an adrenal problem, right? That's the blood test. The cortisol ranges for the blood test don't really pick this stuff up. So saliva testing is what you want. And and like I said earlier, it's the interpretation of that saliva test that's really important too. But that's basically what you want to look at. Tom says, after being diagnosed with adrenal fatigue, how often should I be retested? That's a good question, Tom. So I used to retest people every 6 months. And some doctors will do it sooner. I just don't find that that's necessary. I don't even retest it in 6 months. Now, I've got a fairly close relationship with my patients, right? Because my patients, I'm in contact with the programs that we do. We're in contact on a regular basis. If my patients are incrementally getting better and better and better and better, then I'm just going to let them go, right? Because first of all, it takes a while for this thing to really heal. It does. It just flat out takes some time. So testing even every 6 months, there might be changes, but if a test isn't going to change the way I treat one of my patients, then probably not going to do it. So for me, maybe 9 to 12 months. Probably 9 to 12 months on average. Okay. Becky says, would you consider constant dizziness and depersonalization as normal for adrenal dysfunction? Sadly, yes. I have had 2 24-hour cortisol tests done, one showing very high in the morning, normal, high morning, normal PM. Others showing low morning, high PM. I'm not sure what stage I'm at if this is my reading. Thanks for all you're doing. You're welcome. Um, well, so okay, so it depends. So your symptoms are can be. Let me say that they can be connected to adrenal fatigue for sure. If you've got those cortisol results, right, which means you have your adrenals are they're bouncing around. Now, first thing is these labs are different, right? Um, it might have been the stage or the phase you were in. Um, it does vary from day to day as well. You do want to look at the cortisol, but you also want to look at the DHEA levels as well to take a look at this stuff. This is why I'm not crazy about the term adrenal fatigue, because it's not all fatigue. Actually, people in the early stages, their energy might not be terrible, but they are wound really tight, right? They got the anxiety, insomnia, the pain, they're just cranked up, right? They can't even sit still. So I guess adrenal dysfunction would be better, but then it's a problem not just with the adrenals, it's the whole stress response, right? So the most bland, accurate name to call it is a stress response system dysfunction, but another story. Okay, so you need to look at symptoms. So you need to look at the testing, you need to look at symptoms, and then you've got to start to determine that. The DHEA usually tells people what stage. So you got to compare it to age, right? Because DHEA also goes down when we age. But if your DHEA is high, early stage, DHEA is normal, probably middle stage. If your DHEA is low, then you're probably looking at middle to later stage. So you got to do that comparison. You're not later stage because you still have cortisol, right? You're still producing cortisol. So you're not later stage, probably middle stage is my guess. Okay. Andrea says, do you ever test ACTH with cortisol, or do you just assume ACTH is low if cortisol is low? Yeah, so ACTH is the pituitary stress hormone, right? So the way this cascade works is HPA axis, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Hypothalamus receives message from the limbic system that there's a tiger. Release some CRH, corticotropin releasing hormone. That goes to the pituitary, tells the pituitary to release some ACTH. That ACTH goes to the adrenals, tells the adrenals to release cortisol. So that's kind of the way the cascade works. And as long as you produce enough cortisol, that cortisol kind of gets back to the brain and tells the hypothalamus, hey, we got enough cortisol, right? Problem is if there's not enough cortisol, then the hypothalamus pituitary never get the message. They're constantly yelling at the adrenals, like it's like whipping a tired horse, right? Constantly trying to stimulate it. It's trying to do it. It makes us anxious. We dump a bunch of adrenaline. It's an interesting process. So the only way we get cortisol is because the pituitary has stimulated it with ACTH, right? Whether that cortisol is high or low, if it's out of balance, you can't have that imbalance without having a pituitary issue, and in my mind, without having a hypothalamic issue as well. What conventional medicine tries to do is they try to pin this problem on one particular gland, right? You have primary adrenal insufficiency. You have secondary adrenal insufficiency, which just means, is it a problem in one of those? Like, is it primary? Is it a problem with your adrenal? Secondary? Is it a problem with your pituitary? Tertiary? Is it a problem with your? It's a problem with all of them because they all talk to each other, right? It's just not frank disease. It's just dysfunction. That's the problem. Okay, we're doing okay. Stacy says, is there one main factor to assure it's adrenal? I have all the symptoms, yet more: chronic Lyme, fibromyalgia, and chronic fatigue. I just got diagnosed pre-diabetic, high triglycerides, yet for 13 years, I'm dysfunctional from fatigue. How can I know if it's adrenal? It's adrenal just by telling me that. We know it's adrenal. So chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia, to me, they are two sides of the same coin. So you take somebody with adrenal fatigue, they are in stress physiology too often, right? They start developing all these symptoms, right? Fatigue, pain, weight, brain fog, insomnia, whatever. So they develop all those symptoms. Then they develop the immune, digestive, reproductive, thyroid problems. And this is where the immune system stuff comes from, right? So Lyme's a real thing, right? But chronic Lyme it's probably more of an adrenal problem than anything else because your immune system is not taking care of the Lyme. That's a bigger conversation. Lyme, Epstein-Barr, all these infections. Like they try to pin these conditions on infections of all different kinds, for decades. And they'll continue to. But it's not that. So when your physiology is here, you will be chronically fatigued and you can develop pain. So 50% of those people, they develop chronic fatigue severe enough to reach the CDC criteria for chronic fatigue syndrome. Another 50% of those people, they might develop chronic pain enough to reach the CDC criteria for fibromyalgia, even though conventional medicine has no idea what those things are. And then there's another 50% of those people, which is 150%, but they get both, right? They get both. So it is strongly connected. And just with adrenal fatigue, it's if it walks like a duck and looks like a duck and talks like you're dealing with a duck. And again, I would suggest that underneath your fibro, your chronic fatigue, even your chronic Lyme, underneath that is the adrenal fatigue. That's what we got to deal with. I can't tell you how many patients I've had come in. Oh, my doctor says I've got chronic Epstein-Barr. I'm like, I don't really care. And I had chronic Epstein-Barr too. My Epstein-Barr would reactivate all the time. Well, Epstein-Barr is a ubiquitous virus. Everybody's got Epstein-Barr. So why was it a problem for me and not somebody else? The problem was me. All right, so let's go there. What was the problem? The problem was my immune system couldn't keep Epstein-Barr at bay. Same thing with Lyme. My immune system couldn't not eradicate it, but keep it at bay. Why? Right? I kind of drive my patients, doctors a little crazy. I'm always asking why. So why? What's wrong with your immune system? Well, the number one problem with the immune system is stress physiology, which suppresses it, right? So that's the big issue. You got to treat that underlying cause. Okay. All right. Okay, so we've got a couple more minutes for a couple more questions. And we still have more, of course. I never seem to get to all of them. So before I get to these last two questions, if you have any questions, or if you want to reach out to us, or if you suspect you have adrenal problems, reach out, right? Reach out in the comments below on this, whether it's YouTube, Facebook, or whatever it is. Reach out to us. I've got a great team that'll get back to you. I've got a patient coordinators who are doing free calls, right? Consultations for people that inquire about our all access program, which I still have spots here and there for that. Or we can start talking about the other programs, the Core and Core Plus. So you don't have to continue to suffer from adrenal fatigue. You can get ahead of this. You can absolutely get your life back. It just takes guidance, right? It just takes guidance. Got to figure out what that puzzle is, right? What does your therapeutic puzzle look like with relation to this problem, which is different than somebody else's? This is where kind of the one-on-one contact helps. Figure out what that puzzle looks like, put enough of those pieces of that puzzle together, all at the same time, you get this physiology to shift. When this physiology shifts, you're turning off the wear and tear that leads to all the symptoms, so they go away. You're turning on the healing and repair side of your physiology, so you start to get better and better and better and better to the point where you don't have to worry about this stuff anymore. It absolutely can happen. You just got to do it a little more comprehensively. Yeah, so reach out if you have questions. Okay, so Vanessa says, how do I get better sleep? Sleep's always a problem with adrenal patients. Hypoglycemic diet is the key, right? Work on that. But if you've got high cortisols in the evening, which is not uncommon, you got to get that tested and assessed for to try to do that. Do all the sleep hygiene stuff too. Sleep hygiene is, we kind of laugh at that like it's not that important. It's incredibly important. Sleep hygiene is crucial, right? Even just getting up and getting your face out towards the sun, within the first hour of waking up when the sun's at a low trajectory, that helps to set your biological your biological clock, which can help you to sleep at night, right? Dark rooms, cool rooms, like all that stuff is really, shut it down after dinner, shut life down after dinner. Tons of stuff on sleep. And I probably have, if you go to my YouTube channel, I've definitely talked about sleep. So go there. Okay. So last one, Kathy says, I have ADHD, a few mercury fillings, and only half a thyroid. Can I still heal? You can. You can. ADHD is a common result. I would chunk that into the brain fog category. So we see that quite a bit. Again, we call it a thing. Like my patients have anxiety. Well, my doctor said I just have anxiety. I'm like, well, why? I just have anxiety. Well, 9 times out of 10, there's a reason that you have anxiety, and that's what happens. Like you throw a bunch of stress hormone into the brain, you'll have anxiety. Same thing with depression. There are reasons for this, right? And the same thing for ADHD. Mercury fillings, yeah, I mean, mercury's not a great thing to be putting in our mouth this close to our brain. I think at some point we will find out, we will laugh at how stupid that whole practice is. But yes, you can still heal. And these fillings can be stable, right? They're not great. I like people to get them out in a systematic way, being really cautious at times, especially if they're breaking down. That's a chronic toxic problem. So you need a biological dentist to get on top of that. But if they're stable, they're stable. And that's not the biggest deal. Mercury, it's just a layer in the bucket, right? If you have half a thyroid, you have half a thyroid. It's still working. If you fit, right? If you fit and you have all these other adrenal symptoms, right? Everything that I talked about, yeah, you can heal. Anybody can heal. Anybody can heal. It's all about creating space in that bucket, right? We create space in that bucket. If we have to accept the mercury is there, okay, we'll accept it. Right? Let's deal with some of the other stuff, right? So absolutely, there are ways to get ahead of this. Okay, my apologies. I just ran over a little bit. Please do share this information. And if you have any other questions, throw them in the comments. We can talk about it next time. We're doing these, I think, every 2 weeks these days. So we'll do everything we can to get to it next time. Okay, I'll jump off. All my best. Bye now.